Now to introduce our next and last speaker for the day, Mr. Vijay Vujuni, who is the Chief Technical Officer of CDPI. Thank you.
Yeah, scaling G2P DPI. I'm audible, yeah. So, hi everyone. Nice to see all of you, and good to see many familiar faces, which we've been working for quite some time now. So this session is towards the end, and also I try to curate it so that it goes a little bit easy. At the same time, have many of the speakers have talked about enough about DPI, and based on what you understood and in the morning call out as well, I think almost all of you had a use case on G2P. So before I get into the details, I would like to just get quick feedback and comments. What does scale means to you from G2P? I know some of you have called out very specific, but not all, but I would like to hear one more time as a refresher. What does scale in G2P context as a DPI mean to all? Anybody open? Yeah, sorry, G2P is government to person social protection program schemes. Yeah, thanks, Kamya. Inclusion, financial inclusion, which means getting all the eligible beneficiaries, targeting the right beneficiaries. Pretty good. Anything else? Yes, Sharon. Sorry.
Interoperability. Interoperability.
Interoperability, yes. Very key. Anything else? Yes, and we talked about it, ghost beneficiaries and not trying to give to Brad Pitts and Angelina Jolie's. What else? Cool. Yeah, so we'll get into the details, and those are the real nitty-gritties of it. And any DPI, like we go into the details as well, we will be trying to cover some of these and many more as well. Again, this you would have seen it many times. I will not try to go in details again, but there lies underlying rail here. When we say DPI, it is not about giving a solution or a platform, but it's a way of thinking. And again, to repeat, it is all about getting these three pillars aligned, and that's what DPI is all about, be it any sector, and we already seen 2-3 sectors since morning. And how we try to address that is where I think year back is where, even before Center for DPI formally formed, we knew there is a DPI landscape that we need to tackle with, and G2P was one of the most prominent and common sectoral use case that pretty much every country had from our research and interactions. And we worked with development partners like World Bank and try to come up with this, what we call a blueprint. And with every sector, we try to do something similar, and you saw with healthcare, with those 3 building blocks that try to solve healthcare being a vast area, at least trying to identify a small portion in the ocean. So this is basically our North Star, basically what we look at it from a DPI perspective. And there is no specific solution to this. This is a concept of ideas coming together in any context, country context, use case context, any social protection use case, not only to payments, but also if you are trying to do delivery in benefits in kind and service as well. So the idea of DPI is all about reusability, sectorial agnostic nature. Only then it can qualify as a DPI, and then there is all the other factors of placement, how to approach it. I think Pramod enough talked about it. So when we looked at it, and most of our work at CDPI is also kind of trying to lay this landscape in a way so that all the key players, technology, market, and the governance policymakers can segregate their responsibilities and clearly come out what needs to be acted upon. And the 3 layers that we try to articulate here is what we call the foundation layer, which are the DPIs in itself, digital identity, credentialing, data sharing, credentialing infrastructure, we talked enough in across sectors, civil and other federated registries, and of course MAPper will talk later in this context as well. And civil and other federated registries is the most interesting and most annoying piece in any G2P delivery as well, because that is where the data is logged in, and then the identifying the eligible beneficiaries who the service has to go to is all logged in, and this is where the territory comes in, and there's no need to go and then try to create one more centralized instance. or inconvenience the user and then go ask the same question to the user 1,000 times, saying who you are or what you are, so that I can deliver service to you at every ministerial sector agency level. So the idea of the blueprint was, again, interoperability as a key, like you called out, is how to make these blocks interoperable, knowing the constraints and not getting into invading into the respective territories of those ministries. And again, it becomes even more important because that's where the real-time data lies, and there's no point going and then trying to get that data and make a copy of it. So that's where these dotted lines that you see into the middle tier, where the functional layer of any social protection program is where we felt that these are the generic modules in the payment context, not in kind and service, where the core of the system is a scheme management, beneficiary management system that pretty much every ministry would have developed it from its experience, and there are open source versions of it that has evolved over the period of time, and many partners have also been exploring this area. And this is where most of the action happens, where how to reach out to those beneficiaries in the digital world. And of course, the other three goes without saying, the payments, the banking system, and then the last mile reach to actually reach out to the beneficiaries to provide that service. The key out of these dotted lines, what you see is where we are making an attempt from a G2P Connect and CDPI perspective is to work with ecosystem partners, both on the supply and demand side, trying to find a common interoperable rail so that these system integrations become seamless. And only then it can scale, because the first order of business derivative is about digitization. That's where in the earlier conversation, Kiran was talking about incentivizing players with rupees 20 and rupees 5 to digitize their records, right? And banking infrastructure is one of the oldest digitized record, and that's the reason any digitization you see, it happens in the financial sector. When it comes to health or other ministerial sectors, that is where the digitization is the least happening. And all of this goes without saying, if there's no digitization, there's no DPI play, all said and done. But that is the assumption that we are going with, and then we'll also try to see how to make it more efficient and better as well to scale. And that is where these APIs come into play, wherein they are designed in such a way so that they can work in any low resource setting context, like there is not many digital instruments, aspects of it that's going. And the top goes without saying, the policymaker, the citizen, and then the end representatives who reach out to the end beneficiaries, they also need to have the real-time telemetry access and reach and so forth. So this in a large context is what we call a blueprint. It is not an architecture, it's not a solution. It is all about how to think this problem of large complexity and try to unbundle and do it in an incremental way. And all the pieces need not be coming on day one. If you can think through these logical maps in your blueprint, in your approach note for next 2-year journey or 6-month journey, then try to incrementally build that by one block at a time, one step at a time, and try to make it happen. And again, all of this will not happen unless two systems try to see eye to eye and clap together. Only then the digitization can also happen. So that's being said. So this is where some of the challenges that goes when we look at the digitization. Any integration that is coming is a problem area, and that's where the friction exists. Cost increases, and then the whole silo effect of information being siloed and then delay and then trying to get the right benefits all happens because of these building blocks not talking to each other. And that is the reality of the landscape in any country, because how the systems are defined and the ministries are organized, there is always that interplay that has to happen. So for this conversation today, I didn't try to, there are many areas that can be covered, at least in order of 20. I try to keep it simple, consider the last segment of the day, and focus only on 3 areas. One, primarily on identifying the right eligible beneficiaries, that was rightly called out. Inclusion, how do I ensure I get the right, target the right beneficiaries to deliver the right service at the right time as well. It's more important. Not only identifying the beneficiaries, if I identify the beneficiaries 3 months later, after the emergency, it's also of no use. So the time is also of important essence in this whole chain of events. And of course, at scale, and Pramod talked about in the morning as well, that you need to identify who you are servicing to. And I have seen this problem happening across many departments and interactions that I had with many of you. How do I identify the right person I am targeting to? Who you are identifying, and how am I paying? Am I paying to the right beneficiaries into the right account? if I take it as simple 3 pillars right now, of course, disclaimer, there are another 17 to 20 more use cases, but we can go into the details individually as well. So for all of these 3, I also taken to keep it simple, identify only one area to get deep dive into how to design some of these systems so that it can scale for a G2P problem end to end. So on the eligibility side, social registry is one such building block that many countries are aiming to do based on my interactions so far. On the authentication side, I'm trying to introduce the concept of face authentication, and I'll go into the details why that is happening and the reasons of it. And of course, payment is something totally new that we try to see in India with Aadhaar, ID becoming an address and becomes an identifier to transfer money, and how can that mapper becomes even more interesting use case. And it's not only from individual point of view, it is also from market point of view as well. And I've seen in some instances where the eco market play in terms of monopolies or segregation of account, easy flow of money is also constraining some of that. So what is social registry? And why is it required? Basically, it's for targeted registries, right? So these are the couple of kind of high-level indicators that I called out based on general experience. It's no different in India. We do this all the time. Every state, every local government does this. To identify target beneficiaries, people try to find out bottom X percentages within that population in that area at a state government or a federal government level, and try to reach out to those, because some of this bottom X percent is required because of resource constraints in every country. There is not infinite resources, and they want to target the real beneficiaries, who really require that assistance, right? And then people also look at income at a household level, or their assets, various kinds of assets, expenditures. These are the kind of indicators that give a sense of, are the beneficiaries really worth targeting to those social benefit schemes that governments are targeting. It could be any program, right? It could be a maternity program to a pregnant woman, or to a young kid who is going to a school to support his school education, or it could be an elderly for his pension or hospital costs, healthcare costs, and so forth. It could be anything. So to really understand their worthiness to get those, these are kind of the rules that goes with. And of course, there's again one more important thing, not part of any other social programs. Many governments have multiple programs running around, designed over a period of time, and people would like to target through each program a segment of a population, and then try to exclude few in other programs so that there's a fair play to the whole larger population. Now, let me pause for a minute here. If you look at these 4 rules, and then look at the landscape that exists, and if you really want to go to a beneficiary and say, okay, you are eligible to these 5 rules, all hell broke loose, and that's where the complexity rises, right? Especially the number 1 and number 5, where citizen has no role or control to prove himself there. It is up to the system to prove him rather than the other way around. So this is where the critical part of design comes into play, DPI design, where the policy, the governance side, the market side, and the technology side all have to be in cohesion, basically. And this is the reality. And the technologists, as technologists in this room, it becomes the responsibility of technologists to adhere to the business users, which is the government, the policymakers, to adhere to those rules, right? Now, how would you solve this conundrum of if you are trying to ask the beneficiaries to go about? So usually, this is how it is built, right? Any social register targeting a beneficiary, there are 3 to 4 ways to do it. One is that campaigns, the government promotes the campaign. It is also kind of like a political statement and will to advertise. And then the beneficiaries walk into the government officers' camps and then try to enroll themselves. And what effectively is happening is a declaration. It is not proving anything. It is just, even that's where the Brad Pitts and Angelina Jolies get into the system, right, in a sense. And then the second model is about some governments and systems where there are resources, people deploy volunteers, government representatives, and do social surveys, walk into each house and do that as well. And this also is required frequently as well, and that happens. And of course, the third one is where there are digital systems. Can the systems become smarter so that the interactions of the data can happen? So these are the typical ways of building a social registry, and I'm not recommending one or the other way around. All 3 are required, all said and done. But the question is, how would they stitch these things together so that it can scale at a DPI level and do it at a smart level, right? And of course, the first one is declaration, second one is you're actually doing a verification in line along taking the declarations of it. But there is a trust factor, you are trusting that individual at the last mile, at a population of scale, and then the internal aspects of that region, and then the politics of it, and that's where the leakages creep in, right, finally. So there is no easy answer to that at the verification level. And there is always a cat and mouse that always happens as well, so we have to take it with a pinch of salt, and I'm not coming here saying that I have a perfect solution as well. All we are trying to say is that with best of the information that we have, how can we start building a digital public infrastructure so that it can scale for G2P use cases, the government person use cases, right? So I again try to keep it simple, not too diagrammatic and so forth. The certain principles that we talk about and try to stitch together some of the use cases in which education and healthcare already talked about. It's all about having verifiable credentials and APIs at the root of DPI thinking. And if you think a little bit deep enough, right, let's say for some of the use cases, let's take this, go back here and take a step back view. How can we analyze the data profile that you see here? So one has to look at this data in the sense that there are certain data elements which is slow moving. The frequency of velocity of change is very slow, and for certain data elements it's very fast. Like example, land holding, vehicle holding doesn't happen on a weekly basis, daily basis. People acquire those assets for a period of time at a very low frequency rate of change, right? And those are the candidates where verifiable credentials can be easily issued, so that the verification and validation can also happen offline as an example, and then it creates that layer of trust. And then you are decentralizing, federating that trust into the hands of the beneficiaries, so that he has that authority to say that, hey, this is the government issued verifiable credential certificate of mine, digital, and it can take the digital route end to end. So what happens in usual such scenarios is that people, this is where again we heard a lot about QR code today, I am not going to bash that one more time. But the reason why QR code becomes so important and why people have been talking more about it is for inclusion and communication. People who don't have smartphones, they get a printed paper with a signed QR code. The QR code people have not talked about is what is signed inside it. So that trust exists in that, even if it is copied. Unlike any other digital asset, once you take a printout of it without a QR code, then the digital trail becomes paper trail. And the trust goes back to zero in a sense. So that's where the QR code value comes in, because there is that signed element embedded in the QR code, which we didn't talk much during the day. And that is what is bringing that additional trust, and that is where the verifiable credentials, though it's a digital asset artifact, a QR code, which is a +1 thinking, is going to do the game changer and enable that large ecosystem of users to get into the network and prove themselves and get into getting what they really are demanded to get that. And there are other assets which are very high frequency changing, right? Like salaries may change every few months, every year based on increments and so forth, or electricity consumptions and so on and so forth. So this is where some of the integrations with those systems, the third use case becomes even more important, so that you get the real-time data, so that you can take those. When I say real-time, it doesn't mean every minute, every hour, it could be every quarter, every 6 months as well, because it all goes back to the nature of the program that you're doing. So with that said, the general principles of verifiable credential APIs, if these two are applied as those toolkits, think of this as a toolkits of those 5 building blocks, and trying to solve a G2P problem, and taking those principles of federated minimal info, information that you are collecting and consent based on all that thing that we heard since morning, one can build a social registry which is highly efficient, agile and flexible without invading into the other ministries' landscape, at the same time trying to reach out to the beneficiaries in real time by the Department of Social Welfare who really needs this data. So that's the core essence of this. The most of it data sharing, the verifiable credential APIs, we already talked since morning, so I'm not going to go into the details of this in this call, but just take these as the key building blocks, at least to identify the eligible beneficiaries. And there are other ways of doing it. Social registry is one such way. Like I said, other interview mechanisms and so forth, and it has to be played out based on the context of the program and the timelines that each program has. The next puzzle is about who the benefits are getting delivered to. And here is where we bring in the concept of face authentication. The reason we are talking about face authentication is primarily because unlike fingerprint where you need special devices, and lately of course smartphones are coming with those sensors as well, and it's a matter of time all edge devices will be smarter than where we were 7-8 years ago. Face is one place where both online and offline can happen, and that is where I've seen many scenarios where delivery of benefits when it comes to end users to prove who they really are is where the struggle is, and that's where I've seen scenarios where time to deliver the benefit also linearly exponentially increases as well based on the remoteness of the area where the delivery has to be reached and so on and so forth. What I would like to show here is that this is one example of DPI where if designed right at an identity layer, it could be any identity, digital ID, where face becomes a common attribute that almost all IDs have. Driving license has, any farmer or student certificate degrees have face captured. Whether they printed on certificate is a different issue, but the face is there in the system. If that can be used as an asset to verify the user on the edge, that gives a nonlinear capability to these systems to be digital end-to-end. That is the other key part of it. So the work that we have done here, and that's something that is nothing too magical as such, is that it's a very simple +1 thinking again. Taking a concept of an SDK and packaging face authentication as a module by the respective countries, SPOC ministry, and use it across ministries and sectors, if that is the idea that we are trying to say. If that can be enabled, then lot additional security that people today challenge themselves with in delivery services. I am seeing people in terms of double dipping, fraud and so forth that happens, be it lat-long, device binding, two-factor authentication, self-assisted service, all this can be made possible. Let me play this. The context of this context is like any delivery system, people having attendance on the field so that they can do some social payments based on the work that has been done is one classic use case that I've heard. And we have one use case, one example here, just pause for a minute, is where we have tightly integrated this Face SDK with the business application so that that seamless integration and access to money to the end worker happens almost in real time through this kind of integration that happens with. And it's high trust on top of that. So what you see here is an integration what in India we have this rural employment program, very popular program going on for last almost 15 years. And that's a huge employment generation for many of the rural employment and even in urban, semi-urban areas as well. And this is done by rural ministry by integrating the Aadhaar face authentication as recently as a couple of months back. Yeah, please play the video. So here it is running in assisted mode. The operator who is monitoring the work is logging in and creating a muster role, and it's a one-time activity happening online. And where he knows the area of all the users that he needs to serve, he is trying to download it one time in online mode, and that's where he tried to create the role of all musters, the workers that work in that area. And he's basically on the day on which he needs to take the attendance, he's trying to pull up the list and trying to authenticate each user in person. And this is where the seamless integration from the business app to the SDK that you see the Aadhaar logo that's happening is all happening seamlessly within the app. And that authentication happened in a matter of few seconds. So it is what is proving there is basically a live person at a right location with the right ownership of the operator in which he needs to operate is all happening in one few clicks. And the trust of this data signal that gets captured as a telemetry data that goes back to the system creates a workflow to create the payroll at the end of the month so that the money goes back to the beneficiary's account in no time. So that's the idea of DPI thinking, where taking some of these foundational building blocks and trying to package it in such a way so that interoperability is happening here in terms of technologies like intents and APIs, QR codes, all three are being used. I only have one example of intent here that is happened where you've seen success and failure paths that happened here. Can you go back to the screen? So net, what's happening is basically the use case of proving who you are delivering to can be done even without a robust national ID, what we call digital ID. As long as there is a trusted ID, when we say digital ID, it should be trustworthy enough so that I can take the elements of it. In this case, we are only interested in his name and photograph. And of course, ID, domain ID, whatever the social ministry would have released to it, need not be national ID as well, technically speaking. National ID, deduplicated ID is helping you the next level of ghost beneficiaries at scale if you have to start removing it. So if you have to unbundle it and incrementally do what we call necessary conditions not sufficient. So if you can start off that way, that's one way to go with this use case. So the design aspects are basically how one packages it so that the experience layer from a DPI point of view can be used across various applications. Now not only this, the same SDK, if I am not mistaken, is being used at least in 10 different applications in the country today to help authenticate the users. And based on the value of the transaction, one can add additional features like two-factor authentication with OTP plus face or OTP face plus finger and so on and so forth. Those are all areas to imagine and then build on top of that. So yeah, at the end of the day, the idea of this is also the reason why we are saying face is that face is one factor biometric that doesn't need heavy processing of enrollment. You don't need complex biometric devices to capture the fingerprint, no smart cards and so forth. Face anyway as a natural progression in any country, any ministry today, people capture face and then put it on their ID cards today already. So again, goes back to that design thinking, what is already there available, can we use that and then try to bring that solutions to the G2P problem, which is here and now, that every country wants to address. And inclusion is also a big challenge. When you look at finger or any other biometric authentication from proof point of view, fingers wear out very quickly, and that's a wrong factor to target for the kind of population that one is looking for, especially in rural agrarian societies, right? The fingerprint success rate kind of accuracies goes down drastically for such population. So these are few things. Now coming quickly, and we'll have more time for questions, is the who you are paying, where is the money going, right? And the choice to that. And goes back to the idea of the market play. Every country has got their own current lay of the land. Few are mobile money intensive, few are account money intensive, few are banking correspondent cash intensive societies. Again, as a DPI, we do not mandate there is a straight jacket fit that you have to go the step 1, step 2, step 3 to solve the problem. Whatever exists today, can we try to create a market play again as a DPI thinking, so that equal representation of all the players, and where there is no incentive to go and serve the customer, that can be created. And one thinking that we have is what we call the financial address mapper, is basically instead of capturing the account details of where the money has to be transferred with every program, what we are recommending here as a concept is to maintain one simple registry to easily help transfer money between accounts, between programs. So today the general typical actors of the land, any G2P, government to person payments, is the beneficiary, the department which is sponsoring the program, and of course the banks, the mobile wallets where the money has to go in. And the current status quo is that the specific modes of payments for each beneficiary is to be captured by every program, and it must be easily provided to every department. And the whole integrations by each of the department with respect to banks again keeps going. And based on every country's maturity level, some would have done a gateway and some of them are point to point and so forth. This centralized approach is what a typical digitization approach is, basically trying to digitize the data elements and trying to solve the payment problem in a typical end-to-end thinking. But what we are looking, and this solution looks good on paper, but it's also, yeah. So the idea is, though it looks good, it requires a lot of will and then understanding of the whole databases to come from. So what we are trying to say here is that the eligibility information, what the program is trying to do to reach out to the beneficiaries and the payment need to be unbundled and separated. That's when you try to create that Lego blocks, Thema blocks, so that they can start becoming reusable building blocks. So to unbundle that whole aspect of payments, what we are saying is that create a mapper infrastructure as a one central entity who maintains it, so that the whole landscape in the country shares that one infrastructure, and me as a beneficiary, if most of the beneficiaries will be eligible for more than one program at any given point in time, can easily manage his address, account details, so that the payments can happen seamlessly end to end. So that's as simple as that. Though it looks very simple and stupid concept, the underlying principles of this is basically to give the choice to the customer, so that it could go to either a mobile or a bank money, and that's where the regulation role has to come in, where the government has to enable that infrastructure. That's beyond DPI. Of course, governance layer is DPI. So if that will exist, political will exist, this is one beautiful technology that will really scale to millions to help get the money in time. So that's the mapper in a nutshell. But in interest of time, I'd just like to pause here and then have more time for questions, and anything that I have not covered or we have not covered, happy to answer anything. Yes. Yeah, one here. Then I come.
Sir, I will share one thing. Though the payments to the beneficiaries, they are passed in digital way. The main issue in these, developing countries lies on the cash out of that payment from the bank account or from the wallet to, the people need physical cash. And the most of the, in the developing countries, while verifying, the most hindrance is with this cash out process. Sir, so by the standards or the setup of DPIs, how we are really going, because the elder people or the needy people, they have limited, access to the bank accounts. Even in country like Nepal, the adult, the old people above 68 years, they are eligible for some beneficiaries, SSB benefits from the government. And our generation can have access of the smartphones, but our previous generations, even the grandfathers, they don't have such privilege. We can deposit to their bank account, but the reality, ground reality relies on cash out of that payment, sir. Yeah. So how do we, imagine on that scaling that process in DPI, sir?
Great question. And I think this blueprint answers that question very quickly. That's one of the important reasons why these two blocks are broken. The cash in, cash out usually is tightly coupled to the bank account with their ATMs. So one has to go to their ATMs or to their banking correspondents to withdraw the cash. So if you really look at this diagram, the money is going to the banking system of that beneficiary which have opened through the KYC process. But the withdrawal happens through these interoperable APIs that you see the dotted lines through the banking correspondent, and this is an unbundled layer. And this is where the market play comes in. There is an independent sets of banking correspondent companies that emerge out, and they have incentive now to go to those places where traditional banks can't go.
So you mean PLBs, branchless banking type of subsidiaries?
Subsidiaries. But the key is the important DPI principle, and I'll just pause with that, is to unbundle it so that the money can come from any bank account. So it is not tied to his bank account. There is an escrow process, there is a set of APIs and protocol designed to that cash in, cash out process. But that's the answer to
So in India, so sir, I'm just talking about while in city, it's fine, sir. Yeah. Because even we have Himalayas, even we have different, archaeological patterns as well. There are places in Nepal where it took 2 days to reach that village from a bank counter. So I was, as being from Nepal side, so I am just interested on how the India is doing on rural areas.
So India rural areas, one of the things these companies have innovated themselves. is they have taken the small shopkeepers that are there in those localities. They become banking correspondents. It is not a problem of the ministry. Ministry's job ends here, and then different ministry comes and regulates this whole space in an unbundled way. And those small shopkeepers who have their cash flow running and they have incentive, financial incentive to do that trade, is what is enabling that. And that is what, those are all the market dynamic play that happens once you unbundle it. The key is today in any G2P problem that I have seen in my interaction with many countries is that people try to get that money into these accounts and create that balance as part of that banking infrastructure and show that power of the capital resources. But the end use case of that money is to get easily dispersed back to the beneficiary. But unfortunately, that's the lay of the land. And this taking that next step of unbundling further and opening those doors is what is the DPI play. Yeah. Sorry, I think.
Yeah. My question is slightly apart from the G2P. So throughout the day, I have been watching many sessions, and in those sessions, we discuss about digital public infrastructure. In there, we learned about three things actually. One is the unique digital ID, that's a platform, and the second thing is the unique payment interface, and the third thing is the data exchange. So when it comes to data exchange, we discuss interoperability about interoperability at many of the sessions, but could you please elaborate more on the strategy that you are working on, a national data exchange, if you have anything, or what kind of a data exchange that you have here in India?
Okay. So the way it works is very straightforward. Many of the schemes are done at state level and some are done at federal level. And these registries are maintained both at state and federal level, right? So data exchange comes primarily when trying to determine the eligibility of the beneficiaries by the scheme management, beneficiary management systems, the G2P social protection systems. So the APIs that we have worked as part of the G2P Connect program is to not to reinvent that wheel of interoperability every time. So once they comply to that protocol, a new program comes in, then they can get that access to the data, the minimal data that is required, not the whole data set, dynamically, so that information blindness is gone and then people can take smart decisions in real time. That's the approach we are doing. And I think we are working with few partners as well, trying to, like I said, the interoperability will have to happen on both sides. Only the social protection system can't do the interoperability. The ministries which are holding this data has to open up the data sets in a way so that it becomes useful. And that is where I think our protocols are working towards that.
Do you use any platform, specific platform for the data exchange?
No, that's a secondary thing. In a DPI approach is about APIs first, specifications. How that is implemented, there could be 20 ways to do it. We are not affinity to any specific one way to do it as a technologist, and that's the DPI thinking again. The important thing is to, as a country, one has to say, okay, there is one standard of data that can be seamlessly exchanged, right? There could be 4 different vendors managing these databases. Now, if you go with one vendor, the other 3 vendors will start coming and cribbing, why are you not using my standards, right? So at a ministerial level, at a country level, one has to dictate and say, okay, this is the data standard for my country, right? And there are 2 things again to unbundle it. What you are exchanging and how you are exchanging. That's the key part. What you are exchanging in terms of data standards, we kept outside the specification. We kept it to the countries to decide, and the nodal ministry ideally would like to be doing that. How you are doing it, the protocol, and the order in which data exchange has to happen is what the protocol is. That we are trying to standardize an open spec, right? Now, any platform can implement those specs as a solution in a sense. Yeah. Yes, sorry, yeah, please, I'll come back.
Okay, thank you so very much for that elaborate presentation. I was particularly impressed with the approach you've proposed for building up the social registry, which evolves around the aggregating data from existing data sets. This is very much pragmatic approach, efficient and cost-effective compared to deliberate enumerations, which are usually very costly and sometimes prone to exclusion and inclusion errors. But I'm particularly concerned on the issue for authentication. Firstly, when we want to reconcile strong authentication mechanisms that positively identifies beneficiaries and practical authentications like OTP, the strong ones would include, for instance, facial, the one that we demonstrated. But are there tools that have been developed that can make it possible to be able to capture those authentication mechanisms for facial without compromising the approach of enumeration, which takes advantage of existing data and maybe allowing people for self-registration, but still be able to capture credible information that you can positively be able to use for authentication?
So what are the other one is face, right? And face, that's where the digital ID, who is maintaining that ID, becomes the foundational aspect of it. To your point, there's no perfect solution. If there is no a strong foundational national ID like Aadhaar or a MOSIP ID, right, which is deduplicated and digital ID, and if there are functional IDs that exist, which may or may not be digital, which is still in paper form or some database where there is no API to access it, these challenges will emerge. That's the key part of it. The face that enumeration that we talked about in the use case that demo has happened, those are signed artifacts that are being used to pick the photo that is coming from the trusted system as part of the enrollment. The mobile app that is doing the authentication is seeding the face of the person from the database from the backend, from the ministry. And that is a signed artifact from the ministry. That ministry would have taken as part of their enrollment process the person's photo. And that is what is used against the current person who is authenticating. So that's the foundation of this mechanism. Yeah. Hope I answered the.
Yes, I think that is sufficient.
Yeah, we can.
Is beneficiary graduation also part of this framework?
Sorry, beneficiary?
Graduation also part of this framework?
Yeah, that's part of the blueprint. It's all about the telemetry data and then the information. So graduation comes what? He has to break one of those eligibility criteria rules, right? And how frequently one runs those rules. Once this pipe is established, these dotted lines is like a data pipe, right? And data flowing in a trusted way. And building these pipes is where the DPI is. Once you do it, it's like laying a highway, right? And then it's good for next 10 years where you ply your cars or whatever vehicles that you would like to. So that's the kind of thinking here. So then, yeah, it's a policy game in terms of policymaker refreshing that data and then graduating at a season level, yearly, quarterly, whatever. Yes, sorry, go ahead, yes.
Thank you so much. There are two questions. Brief one. The observation I've made, especially for developing countries, is that the social protection interventions, most of them are one-offs. They are not schemes that run for years. For instance, COVID comes in and there is COVID relief, which is going to be a one-off payment. Now, committing time and resources to create a registry that is going to be for a one-off payment usually doesn't motivate. That's why you've seen a number of developing countries going back or falling back to the rudimentary way of doing it. Number two, it could be a success in India, for instance, paying these social protection kind of earnings or payments, making them directly to accounts, simply because the level of poverty is also moderate, that somebody can sustain that account that has been created for social protection. But if it is a one-off, I do not see how even banks will allow that you create accounts that are going to be used one-off. After some time, it falls dormant because it has some impact, not only to the bank individually, but to the financial performance of the country as a whole. So what would be your advice in such scenarios where the payments are one-offs?
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a counter argument to the second question, but the first question is about one-time registry setups, right? So the whole idea of DPI, that underlying technology that we are talking about here, we didn't go into tech at all in this talk, it's high level, is how simple it is to create one more yet another registry. That is the genesis of this underlying protocol that we are talking about, the G2P Connect, that we are working with the partners and the countries to do that. And some of them have been proven at solution provider levels, and few are yet to prove it at a few country levels and so forth. So the idea is to make the solution technology simple, so that creation of generation of registries can happen if all the ministries are wired one time. Let's say there are 20 ministries, 15 ministries are on board in this network, let's say, and 5 are not. And if your new registry requires one among those 15 which are already onboarded, one can generate yet another registry in matter of minutes if it is designed right, and that is the whole point of DPI thinking as well, to design for scale and then do it right. The protocol that is being suggested and being embraced right now has come with that validation of use of the technology in India and few other places as well. So that's my answer to that. The second question that you asked about one-time payments, if you look at the India story, that's exactly what happened when we started the bank accounts. It was zero balance in the initial days. Then the political will came in, the confidence on this whole architecture solution. Once it kicks in, people will start using those rails more often. That is the investment that goes in any DPI as such. And then now the average balance is anywhere between 3,000 to 4,000 rupees in each of these accounts. Our conviction is that digital is the way, and then there is always intervention that has to come to the residents. But it's a fair point, it's a one-time intervention like an earthquake or a flood that happens once in few years, and that is the only intervention. Then yes, there is no financial incentives for those shopkeepers to go and then pay money. But we see the other way around. Once you build the infrastructure, the trust increase, the users want more, and then the government is more willing to use those rails and then create that non-linear ripple effect. And that's the whole idea of DPI basically. And we need to test it out. Unless you do a pilot and test it, we never know what lies behind those doors. So that's the thing. Any other questions? Cool. Then we have 15 minutes to our time. So thank you all.
We thought that as the next step, we could maybe have 10 or 15 minutes of just overall interactive Q&As. So from all the sessions throughout the day, in case there are any burning questions, any pending questions that didn't get answered, or something else that you'd like to deep dive into, maybe we can take the next 15 minutes to do that. And may I please request Mr. Emmanuel Kissa, our Africa Director, to please lead this session.
Mentioned earlier, now in the DPI infrastructure, now there are three fundamental things like UDI, payment, and the interoperability platform. Now in the previous question, the presenter indicated that it's all about sort of API interaction. The API can be utilized in the case of interoperability established. So if you don't have the interoperability in place, so how we are going to make this interaction happen?
I think that's the foundation of all of this, right? And if you go to our website. So the interoperability is the foundation of any DPI, and if you look at our 5 architecture principles that we have, interoperability tops the list. And the concept that was shown, either verifiable credentials, a QR code, or API, all it is doing that interoperable data exchange from one system to other system, right? API is over the wire, QR code is through the scanner that is happening in a sense, or data exchange through file and so forth. So that's...
No, the point here is the country context is such that now there are multiple data repositories. So the data repositories use multiple convention. Now say in one data repository, the name is written, the first name, second name and the family name.
Yeah.
And in the another registry is in another way around. So how we are going to, address those concerns without, proper sort of a enterprise bus?
That's not an enterprise bus problem. It is more a protocol and data standard problem. Enterprise bus comes the next level to his previous point as well. So at a technology DPI thinking level, there are three ways to look at: people-centric, technology systems, and infrastructure. At an infrastructure level, one has to first put out the data standards. Exactly, what does a name represents in your country? Is it full name, display name, like what people call, or first name, middle initial, middle name, last name, surname? That is a taxonomy, oncology, right? Ontology. So that goes without saying, and all these things that which we didn't talk about today, be it in education space or health space that Kiran talked about, there is an entity which is publishing those data standards. Even in the financial world, I was talking to someone at the lunch, Rebit is an organization entity which is attached to RBI, the governing authority in India, and the technology advisory entity of that governing regulator is publishing all the financial standards. What should my saving statement look like in a digital world, credit card statement and so forth. Likewise goes with identity, goes with other domains. So that is the foundation. When we say interoperability, we mean define what first, the schemas, and that is where the country leadership, and that's where I use the word vendor example. If vendor 1, 2 and 3 represents their data in 3 different formats, you can't randomly pick one vendor and say that is my standard. That's not neutral, vendor neutral as well. And that is the hard part at a government level, and it's the easy part as well if the corresponding nodal ministry identifies it. And how the data exchange happens, that is a protocol. And the third layer comes the bus. That is the implementation layer. That's how we separate. And if these two are done robustly strong, that should have to stand test of time for at least next 30 to 50 years. That's our thinking. Because technologies comes and go, right? There was one soap that was there 10, 15 years ago. Now it's all rest, right? So that's how it happens, and we don't really care how the technology is implemented, and that evolves.
Thank you. Thanks, Vijay. Thanks, Vijay. I have two questions. Actually, sorry. First of all, initially, mobile number or email probably not in a core part of Aadhaar.
No, it was part of Aadhaar from day one, but it was kept optional from day one.
Okay.
It's still optional for both.
Still optional. And for consent management and other stuff, you are using that phone number. Yeah,
that is where I think a lot of this now gets into the details, right? All high level was good. So all assisted mode. If you want assisted mode, self-service mode, me as a user want to use my own details. Then if I don't have a registered mobile number in Aadhaar, then that use case is shut. That door is shut for me, right? And that's where the assisted use case come, and then I end up using my biometric authentication to give my consent. So that's one way. Yeah.
One suggestion for the nation who do not have a phone number or email address on their foundational ID, what can be the journey for them?
Here is the trick part, and we can get into the details as well from a security point of view, right? The takeover of accounts usually happens, and that's where and I've been telling this to many ID implementation system partners as well. Mobile number update is as critical as biometric update in today's digital world. That goes without saying. And before taking any new mobile number or even updating existing mobile number, you need to have a strong process of proving that person consent is there. And I was giving an example. I can't go to Aadhaar and give Kamya's ID and Kamya's mobile number and ask her to update it, new mobile number. I can't do that, even though I'm doing the right thing, or vice versa. I can't go to Tanushka's account and update my mobile number, right? So that I take over identity. That is also not possible. So both the use cases, true positive and false positives, have to be put in the process flow. And the one way to do that is biometric authentication. So the consent is in line along with the mobile number update as one transaction.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Two questions. Second question.
Yeah. We have the next 2-3 days, and we'll have more curated sessions as well. So thank you all. Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
So I think time flies when you're having fun. And sorry. So I'll just go around the room and confirm if you're having fun or not having fun. If we've bored you to death, feel free. It's a safe space. So as Tanushka says, it's a safe space, right? It's a safe space. Yeah, so let's have just round the room, starting with one word to describe what you've experienced today as a country, as a delegation. So Trinidad, if you are to describe okay.
Exceptional.
Exceptional. Thank you. Zambia?
It's mind-opening. Mind-opening.
Mind-opening. Okay. 2 words, but we'll take that.
It's one phrase. It's one phrase.
Malawi?
Insightful.
Insightful.
Mind-blowing.
Mind-blowing. 1 word. Rwanda?
Practical.
Practical. Okay. We have Nepal. Nepal somewhere? Nepal? Yeah. Nepal? Yeah. There's 2 Nepal. Okay, so we get to have 2 of Nepal.
There's only one Nepal, but there are 2 people from Nepal here.
Okay, Kenya?
Kenya, I would say a very academic and insightful. Yeah.
Academic and insightful. Okay, Adav. Okay, we'll take that. Nepal? Nepal 1. Yeah, because I can see.
Yeah, you can. I can.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's difficult to sum it up in one word. It's been an enlightening experience so far.
Enlightening is the word. Okay, Nigeria.
Opportunities.
Opportunities. Sri Lanka.
I would say it's inspirational.
Inspirational. Fantastic. Bangladesh. Time. Okay.
Tanveer. Thought-provoking.
Thought-provoking. Good one. They definitely got the memo coming. I think so. Uganda.
Insightful.
Insightful. Brilliant. Ethiopia.
Uganda again here. Ethical.
Critical.
No, ethical.
Ethical.
Like ethical. It's just like a pinprick, yeah?
That must be Brenda's idea.
No, I'm waiting for what comes next. Yeah, so that I conceptualize whatever comes out.
Fantastic. And Ethiopia?
Futuristic. Futuristic.
Futuristic. Okay. Dr. Piri. Pragmatic. Pragmatic. So thanks, guys. I think, what would you like to see tomorrow? I think we could also go through, I'm sure Augustine must have some expectations. Augustine, what would you like us to serve you tomorrow? From today, your reflections.
Could you repeat the question for me?
What would you like us to showcase tomorrow? What would you like to see? that you didn't see today?
From a personal perspective, I would say what I would wish to see is the practical involvement of the teams. Today it has been moved from you to us.
Okay.
But if you could also have from you to us, but also us to you,
Okay.
such that if there is any kind of group discussions, maybe a brainstorm on some challenge,
Okay.
I would wish to see such. Thank you.
Brilliant. Very good input there. I think, anyone else? Yes, Farid? Faisal?
Yeah, so I think it might be useful just to understand who's in the room, right? So from a country perspective, from an individual's perspective, who is present here, who do they represent,
Okay.
which fields are they from,
Okay.
just to help in from a networking perspective.
Okay. Grouping by sectors and countries. Okay. It's coming. Anything else? Trinidad, anything else you'd like to see tomorrow? That wasn't there today? Okay. Zambia?
Yeah, so we've been taken into a number of areas. I would like us to probably interact with some of the solution developers. So I think what we've seen are standards that are going to give us interoperability. If we can have the actual developers of solutions, maybe one or two, that would help.
Fantastic. I think the CTO says yes, so we should see some actual developers of solutions tomorrow. Okay? Yeah.
For me, I think I would want to see a more practical one. We've done through the theory today.
Okay.
Let's see how the ID works in India. Thank you.
Brilliant. Yeah. And your wish is our command this week. Anything, we are a blank canvas. So anything you ask of us, we will make it happen. I think within reason. So Kami has given me a thumbs up. I believe within reason we'll show you how it works. We'll have some practical developers in the room, hopefully tomorrow, Wednesday, and hopefully we have fun. Good evening. So one more thing?
I think